Okay, can you see that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. I can see it.
Good. Yep. Okay. All right, well, thanks everyone and Wayne for inviting me to come and have the talk with you today. So I'm Ed Kruzins, I'm Director of the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex, as well as another area of work called NASA Operations, so I do more than just the facility here. But we also run ballooning facilities out in Alice Springs and the Australian TDRS facility, which is located up in Yarragadee, Western Australia. So what I want to talk about tonight is not so much about the missions and all the cool stuff that comes down from the actual spacecraft, but Wayne talked to me and said, well, why don't we talk about upgrades and some of the future ideas you've got? So it's going to be a bit more of an engineering talk this time around. And I have to admit, I haven't done too many of these, so slightly different. If you have listened in on previous AIAA type conversations that I've had or other forums, some bits might look familiar, but there's new material in here that I have not shown before. So without further ado, I'm going to start off. On the right-hand side of the picture there's the wonderful, beautiful Tidbinbilla Valley, 35 kilometres south of Canberra itself, and nestled between the Brindabella Mountains and the Bullen Range. And it's there for a very good reason, because it's relatively radio quiet, although we're finding it more and more difficult to be radio quiet, particularly with the rollout of 4G, 5G in particular, 26 gigahertz, and that's starting to seep into the valley, which gives us a whole bunch of new engineering challenges. Anyway, so that's the facility. Very briefly, you can see we have 4 operational antennas, although you might count more than 4, you might count 6. And that's because 2 of those antennas, one on the left there in the distance, I don't know, can you see a cursor? Can you see the cursor I'm doing? No? Oh, never mind.
I can see it, I can see it.
Okay, there's DSS43. That is now mothballed. It's no longer operational. And down here, at the bottom of the screen is DSS46, which was the moon antenna from Honeysuckle Creek. And it took the first signals of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landing on the moon and actually walking on the moon. So that was 8 minutes and 51 seconds roughly. So let me go down a little bit here. Let's see if I can get that to work. Now that's fun, Wayne. Now it doesn't want to go down. Oh, here we go. That's better. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, overall statistics. So just really quickly here, and I've got to move this screen here because it's on top of my notes. There we go. Right, so very quick overall statistics here. So CDSCC is managed in Australia by CSIRO on behalf of NASA. The equipment is actually owned by NASA, but the land is actually Australian federal land. And so we have a partnership which we've had there for nearly 55 years. And the facility was opened up in around about 19th of March 1965 by Prime Minister Menzies. 90 staff, actually it's 89.35 staff, 4 active antennas, 1 70 metre and 3 34 metre beam waveguide antennas. We track 40, say 35 different space missions. Some of those are NASA, actually most of them are NASA, some are European Space Agency, some are from ISRO, Indian Space Research Organisation, JAXA, and recently the United Arab Emirates as well. About $18 billion worth of spacecraft in the sky. And for 9 hours of the day, we control the entire deep space network to keep those spacecraft safe and directed. Our annual budget is between $20 to $23 million a year. And we get something like about 10,000 school kids come through. So space really is an area that the Australian public is taking a very strong interest with. And that's really heartening. And when I came on the station in 2022, I was very keen for that station to have more of a flagship role in space and for the public and Australian peoples to enjoy it as much as possible. Just to give you a context here, so we're part of the Deep Space Network. We are one of 3 stations, and you can see they're separated roughly 120 degrees longitude around the world. And that gives us about a 30-minute overlap in terms of ability to look at the same part of the sky between our neighbour stations at Goldstone in California and Robledo de Chevalier in Madrid, which is very close to a place called Escorial in Madrid, where the Kings of Spain used to be crowned. About 500 employees worldwide, and the headquarters is located at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. And if you look at the facilities, they all look very similar. If you went to Madrid, it would spin you out because it looks just like CDSCC, but everyone speaks Spanish. The Goldstone facilities is quite different. The antennas are separated by much larger distances, actually. That's just one area, top left there. There are about 4 different areas in Goldstone. You can nearly travel 20 kilometres between antennas. And the reason they did that was because they felt that in the early days there would be cross interference between the feeds of the antennas, and we found that was not the case, so they were able to put the antennas in a more compressed state. The next slide, I hope you can all see it. So as I said, about 35, 40 different international space missions. It changes depending on the year or the season. And those things on the right are roughly what we do. So we take the signals from deep space from these missions, and there's just about a mission around every planet in the solar system. We take the signals from the instruments and cameras on board, and we also determine how far the spacecraft are away through a thing called radiometric tracking. And through the direction of the antenna in azimuth and elevation, we can determine the direction as well. And the antenna pointing accuracies are between 4 and 6 millidegrees in elevation and azimuth. You can imagine, you know, a 4,000 ton antenna, which has got precision pointing to 4,000th of a degree. That's kind of what we're talking about here. We command spacecraft as well. We will send trajectory control maneuvers to missions, including the ones that are going to Mars. And we'll have the Perseverance rover, Mars 2020, landing on Mars in the 19th of February, and we've sent commands to that. We also do development of software and systems, and I'll talk a little bit about a thing called Follow the Sun. This is where one station in daylight controls the 2 other stations in the network at night. So you can imagine the remote control requirements of that were quite significant and difficult to build. But we're involved in the software and systems development of that in partnership with our colleagues in Madrid and in Goldstone and JPL. We do radio science as well. Radio science is when you take the communication signal from the spacecraft and you bounce it off a planet's surface, or you let it pass through the rings, say, of Saturn. And by looking at that attenuation, you can then generate images from it. So we call that radio science, and we've done that a lot with not only bouncing signals off places like the moon of Titan to look at the lakes on Titan and their conductivity, but as well as carefully mapping the rings around Saturn. And there's a whole bunch of other things down here, bistatic radar as well. I'll talk a bit about that. That's about a new program that I've been working on for the last 5 years to track asteroids from the Southern Hemisphere here in Australia. And the other thing we have is Earth dynamics type activities, where we have fixed stations at CDSCC, and we understand where the source signal is. It might be a geostationary satellite. And then we look at, if we interfere the signals between those number of stations at CDSCC, we can work out how the ground is moving tectonically. So we do that in conjunction with Geosciences Australia. So it's quite a mixed bag of things we do. Oh, and I didn't even mention the radio astronomy work we do. So we do that in conjunction with the Australia Telescope National Facility and also with Jet Propulsion Laboratory, doing radio astronomy research in things like black holes and hydrogen mazes and mapping chemical clouds in deep space. So let's go to the next one. So this is what I want to talk about, the engineering upgrades over the last 5 years. So as Wayne was saying, I've been really fortunate as director to witness a lot of new upgrades at CDSCC. And we've built 2 new beam waveguide deep space stations, DSS43 and DSS43, and they were commissioned in 2015 and 2016. It took about 7 years, 4 to 7 years to do that program. So by the time I came in, they're already 3 years in and we're most of the way through. And I'll talk a bit more about those soon. The other thing we put in was an uninterruptible power supply system. We take our power from commercial power, but when we have critical missions, we have diesel generators. But recently we've put in a site-wide UPS system as well. So if we lose commercial power and if we lose the diesels, we can go to battery power. We can hold the station up for about 12 minutes. So that's rated at about 3 megawatts of lithium-ion batteries. The other one was Follow the Sun. This is an operational change to the station. Previously, the 3 stations in the DSM operated 24/7, and they looked at their own part of the sky, and as the sky moved around, they just looked at new targets. Now the station in sunlight controls the 2 others at night, which means that we actually drive the antennas of Goldstone and Madrid remotely for 9 hours of the day. And so that responsibility suddenly is a very key and heavy one. But you know what? It's been working really well. And I'm really pleased at how that's played out and how we at CDSCC have been able to buy into that and run the DSM. And the most recent one here is DSS43. It's a 70-metre antenna. As you'll know, there's only 3 of these in the world. Gigantic antennas, and we took that whole antenna down during 2020 and refurbished it, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And that was important to get that back online because DSS43, the 70-metre antenna in Australia, is the only one that can talk to Voyager 2, which is one of the spacecraft which is almost the furthest out. So we have a very important role to make sure that that antenna came back. And it did. So we were very pleased to do that. And coming in 2021, we have just signed agreements for solar power capability at CDSCC. And I can't imagine anything cooler than having a green station doing deep space exploration. So that'll be a 1.2 megawatt system. And dare say, sometime in the future, we might even get some connections to the battery systems that we've got. But there's a lot of complications power-wise there. But anyway, let me go to the next slide. So here was a picture of the 3 beam waveguide antennas. And they're called beam waveguide antennas because if you have a look at the one bottom right, DSS36, there's a hole punched through the middle of the antenna. And the reason for that is we actually reflect the signals off the dish. They get sub-reflected off another sub-dish at the apex on those 4 quad legs, which then bounces the RF signal down through a tube and a set of mirrors down into the basement, which is about 2 stories underground. And that's why I call it a beam waveguide antenna. It's like a single lens reflex camera. And the beauty of that is that the transmitter and receiver systems are all underground. And when you've got a 2 o'clock repair on a transmitter in the middle of winter in Canberra where there's frost on the ground and it's blowing a hoolie out there, you do not want to be up on the apex. So it's air conditioned downstairs and it's much easier to repair things and keep people safe. So as I was saying, DSS35 was completed in 2015. And DSS36 was completed in 2016. And they represent something like about $120 million worth of US investment in Australia. And I can tell you half of that was spent in Australia. So that's how much they depend on our skills and expertise for those antennas. So let me go to the next slide. Oh, I forgot to say that the bandwidths, or I should say the bands and frequencies we're interested in, are discrete bands. So it's the S band, which is about 2.2 to 2.4 gigahertz, which is not far away. In fact, it's right over the top of your Wi-Fi. X band, which is 6 to 8 gigahertz. K band, which is about anywhere between 12 and 20 odd gigs. And Ka band, which is about 20 to 30 gigahertz. And I'll go to the next slide. So I want to show you this one because this is 4 years contained in 30 seconds for an antenna build of DSS35. Now, I hope I can run it properly. Hang on. I'm looking for my cursor. Where's it gone? I'm just going to oops. Yeah, let me go back. move. I've got the pane down. Okay, here we go. I think this will work. So don't blink. Is it coming out okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Great. This has taken over a number of years. So I'm going to run that again now to explain what was going on there. Okay, so we dug a big hole in the ground and we got down to the bedrock, which is made of granite. We have to do that so that the antenna will be stable, rock solid stable. It cannot move a muscle. In fact, if it moves 1/1000 of a degree, it messes things up. So we put the blinding layer down, we put the rebar down, and then we build up the concrete sides. We put the irrigation systems in. Oh, I'm sorry, go back again. We put the irrigation systems in, and we build it underground. You can see that we do a concrete pour for the pillbox section in one go. So we have 40 cement mixers coming in a line to do that. And I remember it well. Our hearts were in our mouths to make sure that we could do the single pour on that because we didn't want to have cold joints in the concrete. Now, the reason we built the dish surface on the ground is because it's a lot safer to do that. If you're trying to do that up the top, putting dish surfaces on it, and someone falls off, well, that's it. Health and safety are out there and you're not building antennas for a long time. There's another video that follows this, but I don't have it. And it's actually the pickup of the finished dish surface onto the top of the pedestal. And that actually took about 45 minutes to an hour to do that. And we had a 600-ton crane that did that. We needed a crane to build the crane to lift it. And that went fairly smoothly. But I have to admit, when you pick the dish surface up, you are hoping very much that the bolt holes line up, and they did. So we were very happy with that. Let me go to the next one. So this is follow the sun operations. And this explains roughly how it works. So the three boxes in the middle are Canberra, Madrid, Goldstone. And this is a graphical, probably not a very good graphic, but it talks about how the day shift at CDSCC will control the two antennas using remote operations techniques and safety systems and fail-safe systems. So we had to put a lot in place to do that. Having said that, we still have to have, when we're at night, we still have to have at least one person on guard on the station, and we do that for safety reasons in case Madrid controls our antennas. And for example, let's just say an airplane decides to fly through our no-fly zone, and they're not supposed to, but they can, and we're transmitting. Then the person who's working there at night, we call them the technical system monitor, he can hit the stop button really fast, and that's part of our safety routine. As well as that, he can double check that the Madrid or the Goldstone people who are driving our antennas are driving them in a way that won't break them. So that seems to work pretty well. And that was officiated in 2017. Previous 20 years of that, before that, we just did 24/7 operations out there. And now we do 9-hour operations and 1 TSM at night. And the operators who sit at the consoles, I'll show you the consoles in a minute, they run 2 missions or 2 antennas at the same time. And now they're going to run 3 antennas at the same time. They took over running 3 antennas at the same time in just about 2 weeks ago. And so each antenna control 1 spacecraft. Sometimes each antenna control up to 4 spacecraft. So you can imagine the complexity the operators have to deal with now. So we use a lot of automation software now to set the antennas up, to control them, to drive them. And really the operators have now become pilots where almost the remote systems take over, and they just basically set it up and tear down the antennas and go to the next mission. And so that's the world of the future now. Automation is taking over. The radio astronomers have been doing that for years, and it's now permeating into spacecraft tracking. Anyway, I'll move to the next slide. Okay, so this is a control center that we built. It's about 4 to 6 times bigger than the old one we used to have. And this is the library we used to have. We took all the books out, took all the shelves out, and we created this new capability. And each of the consoles here is where an operator would sit. So this is just pre-commissioning phase. This picture's been taken. And you can see the screen on the left. You can see that there are 6 screens there. That's how complex the real estate gets when an operator is looking at all the things that control the antenna. He's got to set up the pointing. He's got to set up the right frequencies. You've got to set up the right movement speeds. He's got to check that all the cooling's working properly. He's got to check that the voltages are correct on the transmitters. He's got to do all that. And luckily, he's got a lot of smart systems to help him there. Well, the 2 banks of screens you can see there are essentially, the top bank would be one antenna and the bottom bank would be another antenna. Now they're going to have a 3rd bank on top of that, which will be 3 antennas controlling at least 3 missions. And each mission is completely different from the other one. On one hand, he might be controlling the rover on Mars, and the one screen below he might be doing the Juno mission around Jupiter, which are completely different drivers. And so now they're going to 3. So there's a lot of cognitive load now on the operators, and I must admit they're doing a really good job. Let's go to the next one. Right, Deep Space Station 43. I presume some of you have seen it. Big dish. It's actually based on the Parkes design, which I believe 64 metre. When it was commissioned, it was a 64 metre dish, and then it was extended to 70 metre. The total weight, 8,500 tonnes, and it's the largest steerable parabolic dish in the hemisphere. And it was originally opened in April 1973 by Gough Whitlam. And if you look on the YouTube, you can actually find a Super 8 video that was taken by Simon back then, and there's Gough opening it up. Now, we rebuilt this antenna in 2020. So we shut it down, and for nearly 10 months, we actually rebuilt that antenna and gave it a new lease of life for at least another 10 years. So commissioned in 1973, it'll probably go to 2030 or more. So that antenna could have 60 years on it. Now, Parkes has already got most of that on it now, and it's still going strong. And so we expect DSS43 to be there a little bit longer. It's unlikely they'll ever build another one of these because it would just be too expensive to do so. I think the last estimate was about $1 billion to build another 70-metre antenna. So the world is going to be a lot composed of smaller 34-metre antennas, which are going to be arrayed together to give you the same aperture. So this is what we did. So if you look at the stowed version, which is the picture in the middle, we took off one of the cones there. It's called the SPD cone. We used a crane to do that, so it had to reach right over into the 70-metre aperture, which is already something like about 70 metres off the ground. Pick up that cone in the middle and lift it out, put it on the ground, and then we actually were able to rebuild it and do all sorts of things. The negotiations for how we're going to do this were thick and furious, I have to admit, with JPL about how it's going to be done. There were options as to whether we're going to tip it on the side, and the workers would have to work sideways to put the new low noise amplifiers in and the transmitters in, and someone said, no, we'll do it in situ sitting there, we'll have to crane all the equipment in. But the pragmatism and the good solution and the best solution was to actually disconnect and take the whole cone off. And that ended up being the way we did it. And it worked really well. So we replaced the 20 kilowatt and the 400 kilowatt transmitters in there with a 100 kilowatt system, a new one, because we're having a lot of trouble with the 400 kilowatt, raising the power on that. And we replaced the 20 kilowatt X-band transmitters with an 80 kilowatt, which now means we've got 4 times the power out of the 70 metre, which is extremely useful for deep space, particularly missions like Voyager and New Horizons, which went to Pluto. And may I say it also bistatic radar to asteroids. So we modernised the cooling systems on board. We put new cooling systems for the transmitters. We upgraded the cabling, and we took out some of the redundant copper cabling. We put fibre optic systems in there. So we needed a lot less cabling as well, because we could code more information on the existing opticals. And we did this during COVID-19, and it was the toughest thing to do, because we had to do this in a way we had social distancing. We had to make sure that we still met the criteria for the ACT government in terms of people coming on board. If there was a contractor coming on board from an area of a hotspot, we couldn't let them on. So we had to work out how we were going to do that. So we had to change the schedule if we couldn't let them on board. Oh, I'll talk about that in a minute, but it was a real logistic nightmare. But having said that, we got through it and we were able to deliver the antenna back. So I'm going to run this video for you. This will show you, this is looking into the dish surface now, and you see the quad legs. And the crane's already in place. You can see at the back there. And I'm just going to run it here so you can see them lifting it out. So it's running a slightly higher speed. So there it is. Craning this thing out. Off to one side. I'll just run it again so we can see what's happening. Now I have to admit, working up there gets really hot because you get all that reflections from the surface coming back in on you. And so this was done during part of the winter time last year in Canberra. And I'm going to go to the next slide because this now looks, oops, sorry, I'll go to the next slide. This now looks at it from looking backwards from the visitor centre. And you can see the crane there. And so this is us putting it back. So I'll run that again. Sorry about the music, I didn't pick it.
We were actually not getting audio, but it doesn't matter.
And it all went really smoothly. And it just goes to show you, if you take the time to think and plan an engineering operation and do it carefully and schedule it carefully, you can achieve wonders. And that worked so well. We were very pleased with the outcome, and so was JPL. Oh, I'm going to go to the next slide. Solar power project in 2021. So here we are. What has been the problem? And I'm sure you've seen it at home. Your power bill has gone up 25 to 30%, right? Well, it's no different for us. We do not get a discount. Our power bill normally was $1.1 million a year. So you can imagine 30% on top of that. It's suddenly now $1.4 million. So $400,000 every year, suddenly a solar power raising capability starts looking attractive. And with the cost of solar power coming down, we've been looking at this for nearly 10 years. And it wasn't until the last, say, 2 to 3 years where it really started to make a difference to the business plan. And we entered into what we call a power purchase agreement, where we actually don't buy the solar panels, but we get a third party to build them on our behalf. They charge us a little bit more for the power, but it's still a hell of a lot cheaper than paying the extra 30% on commercial. And essentially we get a capability, which is a lot cheaper, and we almost get it for nothing. It's almost too good to be true. I must admit, when the business plan came out, I did not believe it, but we went through it a number of times. We had a chat with our JPL colleagues and with CSIRO, and we could make it work. So we're going to get a 1.2 megawatt system sometime in 2021. We're just working it out. If you have a look at, you can just see it in the picture. You can see those little artist impression of where the solar panels are going to be. So nominally somewhere between DSS43 and the complex on the right-hand side, but we might actually move it further down the hill. The dialogue is still being discussed. That's more towards the right-hand side. But if we move too far, the ground gets very boggy down there because we've got the Paddy's River down there. So it's probably going to be somewhere in between. And these are going to be solar panels that actually track part of the sun. We've over-specified them to 1.2 megawatts because we only need 860 kilowatts minimum. So, so that should work very nicely for us. And then sometime in the future, we plan and might be able to connect up to the battery systems we've got here. But to be honest with you, the politics and the agreements and everything else makes it just simpler for us just to have the solar power system in there and we just take the power straight off it. We're not allowed to backload the grid either because it's a lot of power. So at the moment, we're just going to use it purely for picking up the base power of 860 kilowatts and to lessen our power bill a little bit. Okay, so let me go to the next slide. Highlights in the last 2 years. Well, just real quickly, so we saw the end of the Dawn mission, which was a mission that went to Ceres and Vesta. We tracked that for a while, for nearly 11 years, highly successful. Kepler was super successful, 2,662 exoplanets discovered to date. And now it's been replaced by the Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite called TESS. And I haven't done the recent count on how many they've discovered now, but the sensitivity is much higher. But what we're hearing about is just about every sun has a planet around it or a group of planets around it. So we're going to be awash with planets in the solar system, in the universe and our galaxy. And Voyager 2, it went interstellar on the 5th of November 2018. And we worked together with the Parkes telescope. We tracked that for 41 years. And together with Parkes, we took the last data before it went across the heliopause. So that's just some of the missions that we have tracked of the 40 I discussed. What's coming up? Well, we've got the United Arab Emirates Mars mission, which was launched on the 20th of July. That will go into Mars orbit insertion, MOI, on the 9th of February. We'll be tracking that. And of course, Mars 2020 launched in the 30th of July. That will be landing on the 19th of February. But unfortunately, this time around, CDSCC will not have the lion's share of tracking Mars 2020. It will be Madrid, controlled by Goldstone. But we will be part of the commissioning phase of Perseverance 9 hours later. And Hayabusa 2, Earth re-entry, you probably watched with great enthusiasm the press releases on that, 6th of December, and that went really, really well. And we were part of the tracking of that all the way for the mothership into orbit. And then other people took over for the re-entry, but we're still tracking the mothership, and that's now taken off again, and we'll go to another target over the next couple of years, and it's to be part of the Hayabusa 2 mission. And incidentally, you're talking about a Hayabusa 3 mission at this stage as well. So, and if that gets launched and takes off, we'll probably be part of that too. Upcoming, what else we got? James Webb Space Telescope, that will be replacing the Hubble Space Telescope. And that will provide unprecedented infrared images of deep space, looking much further back into the solar system than ever before. And I'm super excited about what that should bring. And we're slated to start supporting that. And there's another interesting one called DART, which is I'm trying to look at it here, it's called the Double Asteroid Redirect Mission. And that's an interesting one. It's going to go to 2 moons called the Didymos A, Didymos B moons. And it's going to fire a penetrator into them. And the objective there is to see what effect we can have in terms of deflecting an asteroid. Because daily we hear about asteroids coming close to the Earth. And so the question's out there, okay, what can we do about it? So DART will have a look at that concept to be launched in July 2021. So that's a couple of ones upcoming. Oh, changing the scene completely. How do you survive a bushfire? Well, I don't know if you experienced, but I certainly experienced it. I went to the coast year before last and got caught up in the fires down the coast, and those poor people in those various places along the south coast, we barely got out. And places like Mogo and the other one, I can't remember the name, they got burnt, and it was just awful. Well, we suffered our fun as well in this. In November 2018, we had the Pierces Creek fire northwest of CDSCC, and you can see the picture on the top right there. We had the smoke haze across CDSCC, and that caused a lot of grief and tested our resolve and our planning. And of course, in January 2020, I had the Rural Valley fire south of CDSCC, so we copped it from the south this time. The Aurora Valley fire was a tragedy. It was 80% of the park was burned, 82,000 hectares, 22% of the nature reserve, and 3,355 hectares of rural lands. And those fires came with 6 kilometres of CDSCC. So we just saw it going zigzagging backwards and forwards as the winds were blowing east-west, east-west, coming closer and closer by the day. So that does test your planning. But what did we do? We kept cool. We did a lot of fire reduction work. We made sure that the site was tidy and clear. We mowed the grass so we couldn't get grass fires. We did prepare the underground tunnel between the 70-metre and the building for a safe evacuation place if we had to. Of course, we've got satellite phones and other emergency supplies. We did regular communications with our colleagues at NASA, CSRO and emergency services people. We had regular controlled ComSend. And we even had activated communications to some of the airdropping aircraft as well. We have a zone called the R430 airspace zone, which is an exclusion zone. We relaxed that and allowed the firebomber aircraft to come in. Of course we would, to knock the fires out. And we had mobilisation plans to get staff out as quickly as possible. And even the Department of Defence came on board and they cleared a nice 12-metre perimeter for us for the Aurora Valley fires that came through. But I got to tell you, it was really heart and mouth stuff watching that fire go backwards and forwards. But at the end of the day, planning and our way forwards worked quite well. And I want to show you the next one. Right, so this is the Pierce's Creek fire. And I'm going to show you a picture of the bomber, the water bomber coming over. And this is November 2018. And I want to show you in a minute, you're going to see how close this came. So the road, Paddy's River Road, is about 2 kilometres away, and it's just before the hill, which you can see in the background. And the fire was coming over the hill. There's the elimination station. And it's right there. That's DSS45, and it's dropping the water just behind it. We had a line of tankers and light units on that road in case that fire came down and jumped the fence. So that was on the day. We had smoke all over us. We let the staff go at 2 p.m. And yeah, the hazards of deep space. I'll play that one again just briefly so you can have a look. And we're so grateful to the emergency services and the people of that tanker as well that came through. So by this time, the fire had already got to the top of the hill and was starting to creep down the back.
That is close.
It is close. It was about 2 to 4 kilometres away. And the wind was in our direction as well. And then luckily, it completely changed and the rain came down, all gone. So we're lucky with that one. Anyway, let me go to the next slide. So how do you survive COVID? Oh, fires, COVID, now we're waiting for the locusts. We haven't got locusts yet, so anyway. So how do we survive COVID? What do we do? Well, the first thing that happened was we prepared our continuity of operations plan so we could maintain operations in case we have a COVID shutdown. NASA prepared some planning for us as well. We made sure our planning was consistent with the ACT government. And so we went out of step. We established a site level pandemic monitoring team, which met twice a week, so we could take the latest updates from government as to what we should do and how we should deal with it. Of course, we cancelled all site visits, and I have to tell you this, on the 28th of March 2020, we had a visit planned by the Governor General of Australia together with the US Ambassador, and it was just at the beginning of the pandemic. And the worst thing I'd ever done in my life was to cancel a visit by the Governor General. We had to, and it was just heartbreaking. And that's what happened. We shut the visitor centre down. We sent a lot of staff home. We could only afford 15 people to work from home to maintain operations. 70 people stayed on site. Having said that, we did all the hygiene work. We had hygiene stations on site. We split the shifts, so not everyone was on site at once. So if we did get a COVID case in one shift, we could still maintain operations for further down. The operation staff were on triple shifts. So if we had a break in that, we could shut down for a while, move that shift into quarantine, do a deep clean, and then continue on. We did isolation of the operations room so no one could get access to them. And we had deep cleaning planning as well. And staff and any contractors which are necessary for DSS43 upgrades had to declare where they'd been. And we did not get one COVID example on the site. Unfortunately, Madrid did, and they had to shut the site down for a while. And when that happened, we carried the signals of Madrid for a period of time using the capabilities we had with Follow the Sun. So we were able to weather the storm of COVID-19. But again, it's one of those heart-stopping things that you lie awake at night wondering about, you know, are we going to continue operations? What will happen if we get someone with COVID-19 on the site? How do we deal with this? How do we deal with them? You know, how do we keep things safe? But it's worked out okay. And we've now gone back to most people working on the site, just a few people working from home. And WebEx and Zoom is norm for our communications. So we're used to that. I'm coming near the end of the presentation. I've forgotten how long I've taken. If I've gone too long, I apologise. But this is the future. So radio frequencies are used for deep space communications at the moment, and the future is looking interesting. We're going to carry human spaceflight signals in the next couple of years through the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex and the Deep Space Network. But the bandwidths required are going to be limiting. So we're looking at optical communications, which is the capability of using lasers and mirrors to capture laser light, which will be encoded with information. And you can encode nearly 1,000 times more information on a laser band than you can with RF. So frequencies we're looking at are 1550 nanometer. And JP are looking at what they call an optical RF hybrid antenna, which is a 34-meter antenna, which is now fitted with mirrors for 8 meters from the center. And so it'll be able to do both radio frequency and optical communications from deep space. That's in its advanced engineering phase. And we at CDSCC are collecting cloud statistics over all of Australia, including CDSCC, to be able to determine the effect on the laser signal of the effect of turbulence and cloud and things like that. And that's what CSIRO does pretty good. We understand the atmosphere around Australia quite well, together with the Bureau of Met. And we're going to take that data and work out what effect it has on the optical signals when they come from the moon or further. So we're actually working on that, and that's my research project, as well as being director of the station. Right, last slide, this one is. Asteroid radar. In 2015, I got really excited and thought, well, we've got 20 kilowatt X-band out of a 70-meter antenna. We've got the Australia Telescope National Facility, which can come in at the same frequency. Why don't we see if we can scan an asteroid, illuminate an asteroid with DSS43 and receive at Parkes and Narrabri? Let's see if we can do that. And we did. So in 19th of November 2015, the first experiment was done on an asteroid called 2005 UL5, and we got it. We were able to illuminate that asteroid and pick up signals. And you can see the signal on the top right-hand part of the screen. A bit of noise in it. Signal and noise ratio is good. We can see the peak, but you can see a wide broadening around the central peak. That's called the Doppler broadening. And what happens there is when an asteroid's rotating, you get a Doppler shift fore and aft, and so it broadens the primary signal. So by looking at the broadening of that signal, you can work out how quickly the asteroid's spinning. Not only that, you can also pick out where it is, and you can update the ephemeris of the asteroid. And so that's what we were bringing to the picture. But we're hoping to go a couple of steps further along that. We want to image these asteroids, and so we're talking about doing that now. I haven't quite done it yet. But over the last couple of years, we've tracked about 8 different asteroids, and in the last couple of months, we've actually tracked another 7. And so we provided 4 papers at COSPAR on this. And I don't know if you've heard, but the Arecibo telescope, which was primed for asteroid detections in the Northern Hemisphere, has catastrophically failed, which leaves only 1 asteroid hunter in the Northern Hemisphere, which is Goldstone in California, and there's nothing else. So we are looking at picking up the slack in that and becoming a Southern Hemisphere capability. And most of the targets we've tracked have been natural objects, but have a look at that one in the middle there. That is called 220 SO, and it was deemed to be an asteroid until the optical guys had a good look at it, and we had a good look at it and found a characteristic signature of a Surveyor 2 upper stage Atlas Centaur booster. And that was the first time we'd ever picked up a man-made object. And it's got a very characteristic signal, very different to an asteroid. And so we've been looking at the capability of picking up not only man-made objects, but, not only natural objects, but man-made objects as well. So that's an interesting, exciting future, which I'm so keen to take the station down. Sorry, oops. And let me go here. All right, so this is the penultimate one. So what's it like working with NASA? Well, I wear a spacesuit every day. My kids think I drive the Millennium Falcon. Well, I won't talk about what the government thinks I do. I tell people I walk around in a spacesuit. No, I don't. No, don't believe anything you see on the right-hand side. That's not what I actually do. It's far more interesting than that. And with that, thanks very much. I hope I didn't go too long. And I'm happy to take any questions. That's
fine, Ed. Actually, thanks very much for that. That's great. I've got about half a dozen. There might be some more pop up. I've actually asked the first one. You were talking about the lithium batteries at the beginning. Wouldn't be Tesla who's supplying. I'm assuming you're probably getting it from Korea, eh? Or what's the story with the supplier on it?
No, it's not Tesla. Those lithium-ion batteries are actually being supported by Korea, and it starts with K. I can't remember the name of them. COCOM. So COCOM have provided the batteries for that.
Yeah, I would assume it's possibly even the same for solar too. It's probably a similar type of situation as well. With that, potentially could be another Korean company. They do a lot of solar.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that at the moment, or it might not be. It might be someone different. But yeah, it's exciting 9 years. The last 9 years, so many new builds and activities, and it's been a real privilege to be able to be involved.
Janine's asked a question about the. Oh, this is an interesting one on the power. Will the commissioning of the Hydro 2 Snowy River storage system impact on your business model? You might have been talking. You might be able to get cheap power from them. I think that's what you.
Well, I got to say, I was talking to the engineers about this, and everyone's saying, "Hey, this is going to be great. We're going to get so much cheap power." I said, "Yeah, that's only while the business case lasts. If suddenly the power cost would have dropped to half, then suddenly the business plan does not look as good." But we don't envisage that to happen straight away. But look, there's something really nice about having green power as well. Well, there's a lot of nice things about it. Here you are exploring the universe using the sun as your power source. And there's something, well, I'm a bit of a romantic at heart, and there's something romantic about that I like.
You've got plenty of open spaces too, apart from the cows that I know you've got down there as well, and I think it's grazing around there in some part of it, I think, from what I remember. But there's plenty of space to put solar panels down there, so that'd be a good place to use some of your land down there at least. So that's pretty good idea, and you get plenty of sun down there, particularly in the summertime, of course.
Yeah, and in fact, we're going to go outside. If you've been down there, you'll know there's like a fence that goes around it. But we're actually going to go outside the fence with the solar power and extend that. We actually own the land in a much broader area. We own a lot of the valley, but we do allow the farmers to graze because, well, why not? Keep the grass down.
Yeah. Okay, so John Lee's got a question. Who was the designer manufacturer of the new high power transmitters that you got installed there?
Yeah, it's a company called CEC. I think they're called Continental Electric Company. So they've provided that for us, and they've done an awesome job. And one thing I didn't mention, we had a real challenge last year when we did 43. We had to get 7 engineers into the country when we had a border lockdown. And that tested my diplomatic skills with the government departments. And so Article 13 of the treaty says that we have to support the transmission of people coming in and out of CDSCC, but it says nothing about COVID-19. And so we had border lockdown. So we had to come up and talk nicely and go through mitigation process to get these 7 engineers through. In fact, it turned out to be 5 engineers in. And we got it done. They were in a 2-week quarantine back in July, August, and they came out and did the job and went home again. It worked very well. So we've got a lot of good support from the government.
Okay. Yes, Janine's talking a question about the heat. What the you were talking about the dish when you were doing the work on it, saying how much heat was being generated around there. Was there any damage done by the actual reflection itself, or it's just one of those occupational health and safety issues about being up there at the time with the being so hot anyway due to the reflections?
Yeah, well, we try to keep everyone wears sunglasses, keep UV down. That's a must. You just can't see. Gets so bright up there. And we make sure the exposure of people up there is reduced, but we have to rely on their own good judgments to do that. But having said that, sunscreen, glasses, hats, everything, personal protection for heat is exactly what we did. And luckily we had a lot of cloudy days as well. So, but you're right. You have to keep an eye on your staff. You only have to have one mistake or something that goes wrong, and before you know it, you are not operating.
You got an accident. Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
I would be doing that probably in the summer for that reason, because you're getting some, 40-degree days basically. You're not going to be doing that. So the time you picked is probably perfect to do that in the winter. So that'll be the main thing about it. I had a question on the COVID and the social distancing. Did you end up having to use masks or something like that in the room? Although you look like you're pretty spread out in the control rooms there in particular. I mean, outside's going to be more complicated, but
yeah. Each room had we worked out the square feet it had in it. We worked out the number of people who were allowed in it based on the COVID rules, and then we put a big sign on the door saying no more than X number of people in this room. And I got to tell you, there are a number of times we just couldn't hold meetings properly because we just couldn't let everyone go in the room. We actually took all the chairs out when there were too many chairs in there, so people couldn't go in. In the operations room, we actually marked off the area around each operator with a tape, which was his 4 square meters. Yep. And you were not allowed to actually walk into that zone. We were so hard over with it. Masks were actually provided to everyone as well. And we actually did a clean down of each of the terminals and keyboards quite frequently to make sure there was no cross-infection. I got to tell you, no one, as far as I know, got the flu last year because we were so careful with our hygiene. Not even the flu, let alone COVID. So, but we were quite adamant about that. And we didn't admit any visitors on site either. We were quite strong with that. As I mentioned to you, it was awful not having the Governor General out there, whom I know. I was his scientific advisor when he was Chief of Capability Development and Defence. That's Dave Hurley. And I was so looking forward to seeing him again. And we just couldn't do it.
Oh, you might get him out shortly anyway. It's the problem with this. Next question is on the dish upgrade. Did you take out actually more than one comb when you were doing the upgrade? I know you showed us a picture of just you taking one out, but I'm assuming you probably took the other one out, did you? Or just you only needed to do the one?
No, we only need to do the one. So one came out. And we'd actually already populated that replacement cone. So we did it all in one go. So the replacement cone came in a couple of months earlier. And then we were able to, without sitting on the ground, able to put the new transmitters and everything else in and low noise amplifiers and cabling, or as much cabling as we could, and power conditioning systems. And then when the crane came, because we only had the crane a very short period of time, because there's not many of those in Australia. And so we're able to do a quick swap, just pick one up, put it down, and then just an hour or two later, pick the one that's been done and put it back in again. And then it was all done and finished. because those cranes are so high. If we had missed the window of that crane operational time, we would not have got that crane back for another year, which would have completely destroyed the schedule. And we would not have got back to Voyager 2. And Voyager 2 had a timeout on its computer, right? So hang on, can you just stand by? It looks like my dinner's coming. Hang on.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, we've got 4 questions left, so hopefully we won't ruin
I think just pop it on the ground.
trick at the
On the
moment.
ground here? Yeah, that'd be fine.
What a great talk, Wayne.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We'll check your questions out in a second, Alan. I was just going to ask you yours.
No, just a great talk. Really,
No, it was
really
a-
enjoying this.
Yeah, well, we'll get your questions as well. So only got 4, and you've got.
No, sorry about that.
No,
that's
we
just
won't keep you long. So we've only got 4 left. So
No, that's okay. I'm having fun with this.
right.
So where are we up to?
that's all right. You were talking about the cone. That's right. So
Oh yeah.
we're going to talk. Alan's asked a question about hacking issues, but I'm not quite sure whether you're worried about people hacking in, or even if he was talking a minute ago. So maybe he needs to.
Yeah. Look, cybersecurity is a big deal for us. I haven't spoken much about it, but it is a major challenge, and it's a major thrust by NASA as well. And last time I heard, I was talking to the security guy. We have something like about 100,000 attempts at breaking through our firewall every month. That's every month. That's just us.
That's a lot.
So you can imagine NASA itself, they must get much more than that. We've got very effective systems that prevent people hacking in. And I've got a really, really good ICT security officer who's just excellent at picking this stuff up. He's got a really cool set of software for sniffing things out. So it's a challenge. It's a real major thrust by NASA, and it's probably going to get more challenging in the future. But equally, there are more effective mitigations that are still keeping us ahead of the game.
Okay. Yeah, Alan also asked a question about, are you doing any work for SETI at the moment?
No, but Parks was. There is a Russian philanthropic person called Yuri Milner who had the Breakthrough Listen Prize, and Parks is actually doing that for about 4 years.
Okay.
I haven't heard the outcomes of it yet. I suspect if we did find the alien, everyone would have been jumping up and down by now. But yeah, no, we haven't done any SETI work at all.
Okay. Now there's only 2 left now. Janine's made a comment about the dust that she must have been down there once when there was they were doing the rally. You know, there's a rally that sometimes run around the Canberra area, and she said, "Oh, the amount of dust that was kicking up. Does that cause any problems if you get a lot of dust around within in your area in terms of the antennas and stuff like that?"
Yeah, no, we haven't had any dust problems. The problems we did have was when we had the fire and the smoke, which got quite thick. But we don't have any problems with dust. And in fact, if you've been over there, the Rally of Australia, I think, is held around there.
Yeah, that's what
they have a section called the mine shaft. You do not want to take your car down there. It is very steep going into a hole and then steep getting out. But it's just off the road on the right-hand side as you head towards the station. If you are in the area, it's worth a look, but don't take your car down there.
Okay. Okay, one last one. This is one that Anne's asked, and because it's a bit technical, I might stuff this one up also. Okay, what frequencies can you operate your radar at? In particular, can you operate it in the range of 50 to 300 megahertz? I'm asking and connecting with looking at CMEs leaving the sun using MWA and receive. Exactly.
No, we can't operate at frequencies that low. We can only operate at the discrete frequencies we have been using for near the communications bands we're using. So we're talking about the S, X, and K bands. But we started looking at S band, which is 2.2, 2.4 gigahertz. But the gain on that is not as good as if we go to X band, which is about 6 to 8 gigahertz. So we've been operating at X band now for a while, and that's been working really well. So that's right, I forgot to mention. So with the 80 kilowatt X band on DSS43, we've got 4 times the power now. And so our signal noise has improved dramatically on some of the targets we've looked at. So one thing I didn't mention was that we've been looking at targets between distances between 0.7 lunar diameters away to 7 lunar diameters away. So I should say LD, that's the distance from the Earth to the Moon. So it's 385,000 kilometers. So we've been looking at numbers between 0.7 of that and 7 times that. So it's quite a huge range. And we've been looking at targets anywhere between about 40 meters and half a kilometer in size and diameter. So you can tell, you know, we can look at the big stuff a lot further away, but we can't look at the little stuff further away.
Yeah, right.
Radar is really invidious because it drops off as 1 on R to the 4. So, if, you know, you're losing an R to the 4 factor when you're trying to operate. So you lose it as 1 on R squared when you're hitting the asteroid, and then you get another square factor after that. So it's super power hungry radar on targets and asteroids. And yeah, we are limited, but gee, it'd be wonderful if we get this capability as routine in Australia, really put us on the map in terms of space and international space.
Well, hopefully the projects will allow them to do that. I've just got one last question before we close up, and you can get your dinner. Anne's put a request in. Ed, I took a screenshot of the bomber flying past the dish. Is there any problem with putting it on Facebook?
No, you're okay. You're allowed to do that. In fact, if you go on YouTube or somewhere else, you'll actually find the whole video.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, right, it is out there already somewhere else.
It's already in public, so no problem at all.
Okay. Yeah, I think she wanted to say that she was showing something, doing the presentation. It's an interesting picture. Okay, look, I really appreciate your time. It's been a fascinating talk, and I think everybody there agrees with you. And thanks for your time, and enjoy your dinner and also your conference.
Well, I've really enjoyed the time talking to you all, and thanks for the opportunity.
Hopefully we can get down there one day when social distancing isn't, but I know it's a very complicated story at the moment, but hopefully things will change.
Keep the enthusiasm going, everyone. Thanks so much.
We're going to try and do that. And thanks a lot for your time. And you can leave us and we'll just talk amongst ourselves now. Thanks very much, Ed.
Thank you.
Take it easy.
Thank you, Ed. See
Have
you
a
later.
nice
Bye,
dinner.
everyone. Thank you so much. Cheers, Em.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. See ya.